Something extraordinary is happening in New York. The US Open hasn't even reached its most important rounds yet, but somehow, Alex Eala has already started turning Flushing Meadows into something that feels completely different. The flags are appearing. The chants are getting louder. And everywhere Alex goes, Filipino fans seem to follow. This isn't simply support for a tennis player anymore. It is beginning to look like a home crowd thousands of miles from home. And the most surprising part, Alex didn't need to win a Grand Slam to create it. She simply had to become Alex Eala. Because over the past year, something happened that nobody could have predicted. A young player from the Philippines went from promising prospect to one of the most recognizable rising stars in tennis. And now, as she arrives at the US Open, the world is finally seeing just how powerful the Eala effect has become. To understand what is happening in New York, you have to go back. Before the packed stadiums, before the national attention, before the WTA title, there was simply a young left-handed player trying to climb the rankings. Alex wasn't born into a tennis powerhouse. She came from the Philippines, a country without the enormous tennis infrastructure of the United States, Spain, or many European nations. But she kept climbing. And eventually, people started noticing. Her breakthrough moments began attracting more attention. Then came Wimbledon. Then Washington. And suddenly everything changed. At Wimbledon, Alex defeated defending champion Iga Swiatek and reached the fourth round, becoming the first Filipino player to reach that stage of the tournament. But Washington was where the story exploded. Alex entered the DC Open as a rising star. She left as a champion. She defeated Jessica Pegula, the world number 3, in a dramatic comeback, winning 4-6, 6-4, 6-0 to claim her first WTA Tour singles title. That victory made her the first Filipina to win a WTA Tour singles title. And suddenly, the fans who had believed in her before the world knew her had something to celebrate. They had proof. Alex wasn't just a future star anymore. She was already here. This is where the story becomes fascinating. Alex's popularity doesn't behave like normal tennis popularity. When a major star plays, fans come to watch. When Alex plays, fans come to support. Philippine flags appear throughout the stands. Fans chant her name. And the atmosphere changes. The US Open itself has acknowledged that Eala has become one of the tournament's biggest attractions. The official US Open described her as one of the biggest draws heading into the 2026 tournament. And there is a reason. For Filipino fans, watching Alex isn't simply about tennis. It is about representation. It is about seeing someone from their country competing against the best players in the world. Alex herself has explained that representing the Philippines makes what she does feel bigger than herself. That connection is powerful. And New York is about to put it on the biggest possible stage. Before the US Open main draw even begins, Alex is already scheduled for one of the most visible events of Fan Week. Stars of the Open. The exhibition takes place on August 27 inside Arthur Ashe Stadium. Alex will face American rising star Iva Jovic in one of the featured matches. And think about that setting. Arthur Ashe Stadium. One of the largest and most famous tennis arenas in the world. Not for a Grand Slam final. Not even for a main draw match. An exhibition. Yet Alex is one of the headline attractions. The USTA specifically highlighted the massive following surrounding Eala, noting that Filipino fans will be behind her. That tells you something. The organizers aren't simply putting Alex on the schedule. They understand that Alex brings an audience with her. And that audience is becoming impossible to ignore. There is another reason the Alex Eala story feels different. Her popularity isn't only about results. It is about identity. Alex doesn't walk onto court as just another athlete. She carries the Philippines with her. Her Nike outfits have incorporated Filipino-inspired details. Her merchandise has generated enormous interest. Her social media following has grown. And major brands have started recognizing her commercial potential. The US Open has even pointed out how her rise has gone hand in hand with the explosion of Filipino support around her. That is something brands cannot easily manufacture. You can create an advertisement. You can design a jersey. You can put an athlete's name on merchandise. But you cannot manufacture emotional connection. Alex already has it. And now New York is amplifying it. Imagine being Alex's opponent. You walk onto the court expecting a normal Grand Slam atmosphere. Then you look into the stands. And instead of seeing a neutral crowd, you see Philippine flags everywhere. You hear people chanting. You hear Alex's name. Every big point produces an explosion. Every comeback gets celebrated like a championship. Suddenly the match feels different. And that's what makes Alex's popularity so fascinating. She doesn't need to intimidate opponents with words. Her fans can do it without saying anything directly to them. The atmosphere itself becomes part of the match. Jessica Pegula experienced that firsthand. After losing to Eala in Washington, Pegula praised the way Alex has handled the enormous fandom and attention surrounding her. She described it as remarkable how Eala deals with the support and stardom coming from the Philippines. That is an enormous compliment. Because Pegula wasn't talking about Alex's forehand. She was talking about everything surrounding Alex. This is where the story reaches another level. The US Open is different. It's louder, bigger, more chaotic. New York doesn't quietly watch sporting events. New York becomes part of them. And Alex has arrived with an entire community ready to make its presence known. For Filipino fans living in America, the US Open represents something special. They don't have to travel across the world to see their hero. She's finally playing in one of the biggest cities in the United States. And that means thousands of fans can turn up. Wear the flags. Bring the signs. Bring their families. And create an atmosphere Alex might never experience anywhere else. That is how an American tennis stadium starts feeling like a Filipino home game. Not because New York belongs to the Philippines, but because for a few hours the crowd can make it feel that way. That's perhaps the craziest part. Alex is still incredibly young. She hasn't won a Grand Slam singles title. She's still developing her game. She's still learning how to handle the pressure. Yet she is already generating the kind of attention normally reserved for established champions. And the timing couldn't be better. The US Open itself says Eala will compete in women's singles, mixed doubles with Felix Auger-Aliassime, and stars of the Open during Fan Week. That's 3 different opportunities to put herself in front of the New York audience. 3 opportunities for Filipino fans to show up. 3 opportunities for the Eala effect to grow. And perhaps that is why this US Open feels different. Alex isn't entering New York as an unknown. She's entering as a champion. She's entering as a top 20 player. She's entering as one of the most talked about young stars in tennis. And she's entering with something even more powerful. A fanbase that believes. But now comes the difficult part. Can Alex handle it? Because support can be incredibly powerful. But expectations can be heavy. Every time Alex wins, the crowd gets louder. Every time she makes history, the expectations rise. And eventually, the same fans celebrating her victories will desperately want another one. Alex has already spoken about focusing on her level of play rather than getting consumed by rankings or outside expectations. That's exactly what she will need in New York. Because the US Open doesn't care about hype. It doesn't care how many flags are in the stands. It doesn't care how many people are chanting your name. At some point the cheering stops. The umpire calls the score. And there is only one thing left. Tennis. Alex knows that. Her supporters know that. And that may be what makes this entire story so exciting. The crowd can create the atmosphere. But Alex still has to create the tennis. Whatever happens next in New York, something has already changed. Because the Alex Eala story is no longer just about one tournament, one ranking, or even one historic victory. It has become something much bigger. Alex Eala has become a bridge between tennis and an entire generation of Filipino fans. For years, Filipino sports fans have had athletes they could admire. But tennis has rarely given the Philippines a player who could stand on the biggest stages of the sport and make the entire country stop and watch. Alex is changing that. When she plays, people who may never have followed women's tennis before are suddenly checking the schedule. Families are gathering around televisions. Fans are buying tickets. Philippine flags are appearing in stadiums thousands of miles away from Manila. And social media fills with messages every time Alex walks onto the court. That is what makes the US Open so important. For most players, it is simply another Grand Slam. The biggest one in America, yes. One of the most prestigious tournaments in the world, absolutely. But for Alex's supporters, it represents something different. It is a celebration of how far she has already come. Think about the journey. Not long ago, Alex was still fighting for recognition. She wasn't walking into stadiums knowing thousands of people would be chanting her name. She wasn't arriving at tournaments with cameras following her every move. She wasn't being discussed as one of the most exciting young players in tennis. She was simply working, training, losing, learning, coming back, trying again, and slowly, almost quietly climbing. Then came the breakthrough moments. Her junior success showed the potential. Her rise through the professional rankings showed the consistency. Her Grand Slam performances showed that she could compete on the biggest stages. Her first WTA Tour singles title. And with that victory, the story changed again. She was no longer simply the young player with potential. She was a champion. The Philippines celebrated. Fans celebrated. And suddenly, Alex's journey wasn't something happening quietly in the background of professional tennis. It had become a national story. But perhaps the most powerful part of this journey is what Alex represents. She isn't just carrying her own ambitions onto the court. She is carrying the dreams of young Filipino athletes who grew up wondering whether someone from their country could truly reach the highest level of tennis. Every time Alex walks into a Grand Slam stadium, those young fans see something different. They see possibility. They see proof. They see someone who looks like them, speaks for their country, and competes against the very best players in the world. And that kind of connection cannot be measured by rankings. It cannot be measured by prize money. It cannot even be measured by trophies. That changes the atmosphere completely. The expectations are higher. The cameras are closer. The crowds are bigger. The opponents are watching. And every match now carries another layer of pressure. But Alex has already shown that pressure doesn't necessarily stop her. Sometimes it seems to make her even more dangerous. And that's why the US Open could become another defining chapter. Because New York is not just another tennis city. It's one of the biggest media capitals on earth. Everything becomes louder here. Every victory becomes a headline. Every upset becomes a story. Every emotional moment becomes a viral clip. And if Alex starts winning, the Eala effect could become enormous. Imagine Arthur Ashe Stadium packed with tens of thousands of fans. Imagine the cameras cutting to a sea of Philippine flags. Imagine the chants beginning before the first serve. Imagine Alex walking onto the court and hearing thousands of people screaming her name. That is no longer just a tennis match. They have watched the journey. They've seen the setbacks. They've seen the losses. And they've watched her come back stronger. So when Alex steps onto the court in New York, those fans aren't simply supporting a player. They're supporting the journey. They're supporting everything that came before this moment. From the early days, to the junior tournaments, to the first Grand Slam breakthrough, to Wimbledon, to defeating Swiatek, to Washington, to lifting that first WTA trophy. Every chapter has brought her here. And now there is another chapter waiting. The US Open. The biggest stage of them all. The flags are ready. The fans are ready. New York is ready. And Arthur Ashe Stadium is waiting. But nobody knows exactly what happens next. Maybe Alex makes another deep run. Maybe she produces another shocking upset. Maybe she goes even further than anyone expects. Or maybe she experiences a difficult loss. But even then, something has already been accomplished. Because the Philippines now has a tennis star capable of making an entire country believe. And that belief isn't disappearing after one match. It isn't disappearing after one tournament. It is only getting started. So when Alex Eala walks onto the court in New York, remember what you're actually watching. You're not just watching a 21-year-old tennis player compete in another Grand Slam. You're watching a player who has changed the relationship between an entire country and the sport of tennis. You're watching Filipino fans turn stadiums into celebrations. You're watching a young athlete transform attention into inspiration. And you're watching a story that is still being written. Because the US Open might be the next chapter. But it is certainly not the final one. Toronto showed the world the power of her fans. Washington showed the world that Alex could win. Wimbledon showed the world that she could defeat the best. And now New York has the opportunity to show just how big this phenomenon can become. If the last year has taught us anything, it's this. Never assume you've seen the ceiling of Alex Eala's rise. Every time the world thinks the story has reached its peak, another crowd appears. Another victory arrives. Another record falls. Another country starts paying attention. And another group of young fans starts believing that maybe they can do it too. That is why this is bigger than one tournament. Because trophies eventually go into cabinets. Rankings eventually change. Matches eventually end. But inspiration can last for generations. And Alex Eala may already be creating that kind of legacy. So when the Philippine flags rise inside Arthur Ashe, when the chants begin, when Alex walks toward the baseline, the crowd won't simply watch. The crowd will follow. And for one extraordinary US Open, the biggest tennis tournament in America may feel less like a neutral Grand Slam, and more like a Filipino home game in the heart of New York.